The January 6th committee had two former Oath Keepers, Stephen Ayres and Jason Van Tatenhove, testified on Tuesday on where they were on January 6th. Hunter Biden's laptop has shown some disturbing footage of his exploits and drug use with prostitutes. First Lady Jill Biden compares Latino people to breakfast tacos, and conservatives are furious. Or are they? Surveillance footage has also shown Uvalde police who stood by and even checked their phones instead of taking down the shooter during the Uvalde shooting. AOC is sexually harassed at the Capitol steps by conservative comedian Alex Stein. 10-year-old rape victim who traveled to Indiana abortion updates. People who still think the election was stolen have been going door to door around the country asking people who they voted for in the election. Find out these stories and what I think on this current episode of Current Events on Tap. And good evening, listeners, and welcome to another episode of Current Events on Tap with yours truly, Alex Kirsch, Army veteran, truck driver, pragmatic progressive, and podcaster. If this is your first time listening, be sure to show me some love by sharing this show out. If you need to listen to this show on the replay, you can either listen to it here on Spreaker, YouTube, Spotify, and even iHeartRadio. This podcast sums up all the week's current events, and I will give you my opinion on these matters. But first, it is time to talk about the beer of the week. And tonight's beer week, I decided to bring up a very popular and a very mainstream beer. One that has plenty of history behind it too, right here in the United States of America. The champagne of beers, Miller High Life. And I will also rate it based upon price, pour, aroma, and the taste, and then I will give it an overall grade at the end. A little bit of history though. This beer was founded by the Miller Brewing Company, which is based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, in 1855 by Frederick Miller when he left Germany to come live in the United States. The Miller High Life beer, however, was first introduced in 1903, and it always comes in a champagne-shaped bottle. Now, there's a lot of speculation as to why it's called the champagne of beers, but some people believe that it's because the way the beer bottle is shaped and the way that the bubbles just form at the top, sort of like a champagne. It always comes in a clear bottle, and, you know, the beer itself does have like a somewhat of a champagne look to it, but you know, that's not important. So its alcohol percentage is 4.6%, and you can buy this at any local grocery store or liquor store all across the 50 states across this country. So anyway, let's go ahead and go down into the rating scheme. Price, 5 out of 5. It's a very, very cheap beer. But you know what? I'm firmly okay with that because, you know what, honestly, for a mass-produced beer, you truly get what you pay for with this beer. Usually a 6-pack of beer will cost like about $6, which is good. And once again, like if you buy like a 12-pack, it's going to be about $11. And the price is just going to keep, you know, going up the more, like, what if you like a 24-pack and what have you. Now that I ended up getting the 6-pack of bottled beer because I felt like it was the best one to offer because there's more beer involved with it. And because, like I said, so once again, I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5, once again, for it being a very cheap beer. And I'm okay with that. It's mass-produced, and I feel like you get what you pay for. Next, the pour. I'm going to give this one a 2 out of 5. It's a very pour. I mean, anytime you pour it inside of there, the head, you're not going to get too much out of it. You don't have to be a professional pourer. You don't have to tilt your glass a certain way. You can pour it however which way, and then like you're pretty much going to get the same result out of it. There's nothing much to scream about there. So again, a 2 out of 5. Not much of a difference, honestly. Aroma, I'm also going to give it a 2 out of 5. Once again, very meh. You know, it smells like any other standardized beer out there. But when you first take a whiff of it, you kind of get a whiff that's similar to, you know, corn nuts, maybe a little bit of toffee. So, again, 2 out of 5, nothing really to scream about. Now, the taste. I'm going to give this one, actually, a fairly solid 3 out of 5. It tastes pretty good for a cheap beer. It's something that I definitely consider buying over and over again, and I have bought many, many times. It's a beer that I definitely prefer to drink cold. It always tastes better when it's cold, time for another drink real quick. On tap, however, this beer is especially good. It's not one that you should really drink at room temperature. Now remember, I always rate a good beer, like a really good beer, one that you can drink both cold and at room temperature, okay? Anyway, overall, I'm going to give it a solid 3 out of 5. It's still a good beer. That's also just happens to be massive mass-produced, okay? And again, the reason why I'm also giving it such a higher rating is because it's got such a lengthy history within this country, and it's one that we should all be thankful for. I, for one, am definitely content that I've had this beer, and I'll perfectly content buying this beer if nothing else really strikes my fancy. Highly, highly recommend it. Now, on to current events. On Tuesday, the January 6th had another committee. It's the 7th committee that they've had since these committees have started. Now, there's a lot of people out there that are saying that this is nothing more than a shit show. It's just nothing more than a kangaroo court, which I highly disagree with, okay? This is very, very important that they hold these hearings. Now, this is basically investigative, and this is what they found, and they are bringing witnesses forward. So there is no cross-examination in regards to this, let alone the fact that there are people that have the opportunity to come forward and submit their questions afterwards. They've been given full opportunity to do so, and if they choose not to participate, well, guess what? That's entirely on them. So this week's committee members was, of course, Benny Thompson, who is the chairman, vice chairman Liz Cheney, and then the two other chairmen was Jamie Raskin of Maryland and Stephanie Murphy of Florida. Now, I want everybody to understand something. There was a lot that came out of this. A lot of this, the testimony that was given, especially by the two witnesses that they brought in today, Stephen Ayres and Jason Van Tatenhove. I know I probably butchered that name, and I'm really sorry about that. But these two guys were all part of the Oath Keepers, the Proud Boys, what have you. One of them actually was a part of the organization. The other one, he just kind of did like their writing and whatnot and their blogs and stuff. And they really kind of offered a lot of testimony about what the Proud Boys are all about and what the Oath Keepers are all about. And what the general consensus is based upon these guys, that these are dangerous extremist groups. This is nothing that we have never, this is not exactly earth-shattering news, though. I remember a long time ago, I actually engaged with the Proud Boys when they still had a Facebook, and I said, I have a few questions for you. And they said, okay, what's your question? I was like, what is the Proud Boys all about? And I did not get a solid answer out of it. And I was like, well, what is it your goal? What is it you guys hope to do? And I just could not get a solid answer out of them. So it kind of goes to show that maybe they didn't even really have a goal. Originally, it was started by Gavin McInnes of Rebel Media, and until then he decided this is way too extreme for me, so guess what? I'm going to leave the Proud Boys. They then became sort of like a cult following where your initiation is basically where you have to recite 5 breakfast cereals while getting punched in the shoulder. Now, originally, the Proud Boys, as we could see, were like an answer to the Antifas of the world, of the United States, that is. However, it's turned and escalated into something much, much worse. Both of these gentlemen actually offered a lot of insight, and we learned a little bit more about like what the purposes they were there for. But I'm going to go over that in just a second. First things first, they showed new testimony during a tape deposition of Pat Cipollone, who was an attorney that worked for the Trump administration. He was asked a great deal of questions, but the most important thing that I can bring up is the fact that when they asked him if he at any point told former President Trump that he should concede the election, he said yes, he definitely should. He should definitely concede the election, which is really important because there is no proof or evidence to prove, and there still isn't. And no, I still haven't watched 2,000 Mules, and until they actually make it free, I'm not going to watch it. But he said even Bill Barr, even Pat Cipollone, they all agreed that there was no evidence to prove that the election had been stolen, that there was no ballot boxes that were being stuffed, that there was no Dominion voting machines that were being tampered with to give Biden more votes. There's no proof of that. However, the president, in his infinite wisdom, decided to bring in outside assistance. Former Lieutenant General Mike Flynn and former prosecutor Sidney Powell. Now, I just want everybody to understand something. None of these people worked for the administration. They were not part of the Trump administration at any point. They were brought in as outside assistants, essentially. One of the most bizarre things that they actually did, one of many things, is they actually held an office, or a meeting inside the Oval Office with President Trump. And then other members of his administration came in, and apparently there was a huge squabble where they were kind of going back and forth between each other. Apparently some insults were thrown. But eventually, it just came down to the fact that Pat Cipollone was saying these people should not be here, and then he was told that he was being a pussy about it, that they weren't fighting for the president hard enough, which I'm pretty sure Pat Cipollone was doing everything in his power, and I'm not just saying that because, I'm simply saying that because there was no fight left to have. What more could these people have done? However, at the end of the day, though, when the president apparently decided to let Mike Flynn and Sidney Powell and Rudy Giuliani all come together to find out, okay, so this is what we're going to do. So Mike Flynn and Sidney Powell actually drafted an executive order for the president to sign, which he never did sign, thank God, to seize voting machines. Now, just think about how crazy that is. They were going to use the Department of Defense to go around the entire country to seize voting machines. That is frightening, ladies and gentlemen. That is exceedingly frightening. The thought that people would actually entertain putting something like this forward should be a shock to everybody. And again, I'm glad that he did not sign it, but I'm wondering if he considered it, honestly. That I probably have no doubt. He probably thought about it, but Pat Cipollone and Bill Barr said, no, you can't do that. You can't just grab voting machines and round these voting machines up. It's completely preposterous. It truly is. And I just want everybody to understand something. This is a completely preposterous idea, but, we're talking about Trump here. This guy has nothing but ridiculous ideas. But, I'm not here going to sit there and just bash Trump, but there's plenty of that to come around, actually. There was a lot of testimony that was come forward, but the testimony that came forward was actually really pivotal. Stephen Ayres talked about on the day of January 6th, the reason why he came there was because at the time, he truly did believe that the election was being stolen from the American people. And as Trump sat up there and gave his speech and said, we're going down to the Capitol, and said that he wants people to be peacefully, even though he only mentioned peacefully once. He also then talked about how you have to show strength, because if you don't show strength, you're going to lose your country. Talked about how Mike Pence needs to do the right thing. If he doesn't do the right thing, we're all going to be really, really upset with him, the whole 9 yards. So according to Stephen Ayres, he says, the president got everyone riled up. He testified on Tuesday. He told them to head down to the Capitol, and we basically followed what he said. Now, there are people out there saying, oh, well, he didn't say start a riot, but he also didn't say don't start a riot. He said protest peacefully, but again, remember, he said on multiple occasions to show strength. Showing strength does not mean going down there peacefully. It means you need to make a statement, which they did go and make a statement. For months, he had talked about how the election was being stolen. They're stealing our democracy. They're stealing our country. You've got to fight for your country. For months, he talked about this, and people bought into it. Let alone the fact that, don't forget, his buddy, Rudy Giuliani, even stated how there needs to be a trial by combat. Now, what does that mean to people when he says trial by combat? Does that mean that, people are just going to talk about doing things? No. That means people are going to take action. Because look what happened down at the Capitol building. The protesters and rioters got within 40 feet of then Vice President Mike Pence. 40 feet, for crying out loud. That's dangerous. Let alone the fact that one of the rioters, Ashley Babbitt, was shot after she failed to follow directions by a Capitol police officer. She became a threat as soon as they broke that barrier and she started crossing over. She was a direct threat to the Vice President of the United States, and the Capitol police officer did his job. She didn't need to die, but she also didn't need to be there. She made her decision. These people all became a national security threat. These guys recognize this. That's why they were testifying this. And it's absolutely frightening, the fact that there are so many people out there that are talking about, oh, well, wait a second. Why is it so many people are not denouncing the summer of 2020 riots? We are denouncing that. But the thing is, there was thousands upon thousands of arrests. Thousands of people have pled guilty and are serving time in prison for what they did. You're not making a good case. If you're worried about why aren't we talking more about the summer of 2020 riots, we are. But the thing is, those people have already been prosecuted. And now people are being prosecuted for what they partook in on January 6th of 2021. These people need to be held accountable. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about this. So Van Tatenhove said something that I felt was extremely powerful, actually. He talked about how he really felt like, we were misled. We never should have done this, and I apologize. They apologized to the police officers that were there once they gave their testimony, which I can understand that some of the police officers felt a certain way about that because it's too little too late. It's been, over a year and a half, and you're just now apologizing. But the thing is, these guys understand that they screwed up. They were misled, and they were a part of something they now regret for the rest of their lives. It's going to follow them forever. There's no doubt about it. But the thing that really took me by Van Tatenhove is when he said, and I quote, "I do fear for this next election cycle, because who knows what that might bring. A president that's willing to instill and encourage, whip up a civil war amongst his followers using lies and deceit and snake oil, and regardless of the human impact, what else is he going to do if he gets elected again? All bets are off at that point, and that's a scary notion," he said. Now, I want everybody to take the time to think about that. He's not talking about specifically Donald Trump. He's just a person, an example. But there are people out there that could be like Trump, maybe even worse than Trump, that could follow the same exact path. I mean, could you think of anything more dangerous than somebody that's willing to rile up an entire audience, an entire group to actually want to declare civil war if you don't follow through? That if you incite enough people to rally to your cause, enough loyalists, people that will die for you, that are willing to go to prison for you. Because a lot of these guys said, "I'm willing to die for what I'm about to do. I'm willing to go to prison for what I'm about to do." Just think if that is millions of people across the country, that is the flames are stoked by this guy or gal, whoever runs for president next. Imagine if they create that kind of loyalty once again. How dangerous would that be for our country? It would be devastating. It could fracture our entire country. This is why it is so dangerous for people to follow behind one person. And I keep quoting Theodore Roosevelt because he, to me, is the greatest president ever. He said, "Patriotism means to stand behind the country. It does not mean standing behind any president or any elected official." I might be paraphrasing, but it still rings true to this day. The president works for us. We are supposed to be critical of the president and every elected official that runs into office. We're not supposed to be loyal to them. There are dangers involving when you throw your loyalty behind one person that much. Nobody should have that much power. Now, before I move on to the next topic, okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about Stephanie Hunter and the fact that she shared a very, very powerful testimony. This is really, really powerful and I want everybody to listen to this and understand why this is so important. She talks a little bit about like how we shouldn't be talking about ourselves, but she gives a little backstory about herself and why it's so important that people hear her side of the story as to why it's important to hear what she has to say.
At one of our first hearings, Chairman Thompson explained that the members of this committee would not spend much time talking about ourselves. Rather, we would let the evidence play the leading role. And the chairman was right, because this isn't about promoting ourselves as individuals. It's about protecting the country we love. And it's about preserving what actually makes America great: the rule of law, free and fair elections, and the peaceful transfer of power from one elected leader to the next. But if I may say a word about myself and why I'm proud to serve on this committee. I'm the only member of this committee who was not blessed to be born an American. I was born in Vietnam after the Vietnam War, and my family and I fled a communist government and were rescued by the U.S. Navy and were given sanctuary in America. My patriotism is rooted in my gratitude for America's grace and generosity. I love this country. On January 6th, 4 decades after my family fled a place where political power was seized through violence, I was in the United States Capitol, fleeing my fellow Americans. Members of the angry mob had been lied to by a president and the other powerful people who tried to convince them without evidence that the election had been stolen from them. Some of them then tried to use physical violence to overturn the outcome of a free and fair election. Our committee's overriding objective is to fight fiction with facts, to create a full account for the American people and for the historical record, to tell the truth of what happened and why it happened, to make recommendations so it never happens again, to defend our democracy. To me, there's nothing more patriotic than that.
How powerful is that? The fact that she says that the ability to fight against disinformation and the ability to fight for a free and fair election, and it's just frightening to think about. Like people always quote about, oh, we're afraid the communists are going to take over and things like that. She fled Vietnam to flee that communist dictatorship, and then now she's running away from her own countrymen. And yes, her own countrymen. She is an American citizen. She is an American elected official. And yet people are chasing her down and chasing down other elected officials, all because of a lie. All because of one man and a group of other loyalists that say the election was stolen, with no proof whatsoever. To me, this is a shame. This is why these hearings are so important. This is why it is so important for these hearings to continue. And you can disagree with me all you want to. I don't care. I am telling you that it's a fact that these hearings must continue. The people here have a right to know. For years, we've talked about how important it is to get the truth about Benghazi. And we got the truth about Benghazi. For years, we got the truth. We tried to seek the truth about this election, whether it was fair or not. And it is fair. It was not stolen. The power to find the truth. The truth should never have a bias. That was a former catchphrase that I used to use when I hosted Depth of Perspective. Where the truth has no bias. And in this case, the truth should never have any bias. Next, Hunter Biden's laptop. Now, I'm sure some people are like, oh, here we go, Hunter Biden's laptop. But no, we actually should talk about Hunter Biden's laptop. Why is it so important that we talk about this? Well, for starters, yes, he is the son of Joe Biden. People love to talk about Hunter Biden. Why? Because in the past, it's been shown that he's used drugs, that he's had sex with prostitutes and things like that. He's done what some people call shady business deals with China and Ukraine and whatnot. People always try to tie Hunter Biden, saying that like the reason why we got involved in Ukraine in the first place is because we're trying to cover up the tracks of, his business deals with Ukraine. I mean, people love to just talk about it. Well, apparently Hunter Biden dropped off his laptop in Delaware and he left it at a laptop repair shop and completely forgot about it. And then somehow Rudy Giuliani got a hold of it, and then he held onto it for a year, and now things are finally starting to come out. Now, mind you, the laptop came out in like 2020 sometime, and we've heard very, very, very little about it. Well, recent footage has been released of Hunter Biden being involved with prostitutes, using excessive amounts of drugs and things like that. It was some pretty harrowing stuff to actually watch. I mean, somebody made an entire music video about it, right? And you saw the prostitutes, you saw him like butt naked, smoking cigarettes and doing some drugs here and there. It's not a very flattering picture for Hunter Biden. I'm not going to lie. There's a lot of really horrible things that he's probably done. I'm not going to deny this, okay? But as far as it's concerned, okay, federal charges apparently are on the way against him, okay? Well, here's my take on this. If he is guilty of something, throw the frickin' book at him. I don't care, all right? Hunter Biden means absolutely nothing to me, okay? As far as I know, Hunter Biden has also been sober for 2 or 3 years now. But if he's guilty of some crime, throw the damn book at him. I don't care. I have to be consistent in this regard. He means absolutely nothing to me. And guess what? If the president is guilty of something, throw the book at him. I don't care. If we are going to start somewhere to put an end to corruption within all of our elected officials, then by all means, go for it. But you better have your facts straight, because if you don't, you're going to look like a moron. But the thing is, it's just so amazing like how people are like, we have got to put an end to Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden is a corrupt individual. Yeah. Yeah, he is. Maybe he is. I don't know. I don't know all the facts of the case. All I know is what I'm seeing right now with the footage that's being shown. If he's guilty of something, throw the damn book at him, okay? Throw the damn book at him. I do not care. But the thing is, it's always so funny like how the Republican base and the conservative base wants Hunter Biden to be hung out to dry, needs to be roasted on a spit. But yet, I have not seen any conservatives anywhere on social media denounce Matt Gaetz for what he's done, or the things he's accused of doing, that is. So apparently Matt Gaetz sent $900 to a sex trafficker and possibly had a sexual relationship with a minor across state lines. And this case is still ongoing. His ex-girlfriend has testified in a closed deposition, and little to no denouncement from them. I think it's simply because the conservative base does not care. Matt Gaetz is one of us, therefore we're not going to denounce him. Why should we? He's a Trump loyalist. Why should we throw out another Trump loyalist under the bus? Or it's because he still has some use, possibly. Because I'm pretty sure that the reason why Madison Cawthorn, all that footage got leaked, and that the reason why he got voted out was because, one, he was useless, and two, it's because he was dead weight to the Republican Party. Matt Gaetz might have some use for the Republican Party. What use that is, I have no idea. The guy's an absolute moron. He's a complete tool. He's a failure. He's got a criminal record of driving under the influence, the whole 9 yards. He just has no redeeming qualities whatsoever. But yet people are... Why do people vote for this guy? That's one thing I would love to know. What makes Matt Gaetz so appealing? And the fact that this guy has actually sent money to a sex trafficker should just be setting off alarm bells for every conservative from as far as the eye can see. But they claim to be the party of family values and morality. I'm not seeing it right now. Can someone please sell me on this Republican ticket? I mean, why is it that I should even consider voting Republican when you got people like Matt Gaetz on your side? The guy likes to bash people in the military when he never served himself. He loves to bash people like Lloyd Austin. Lloyd Austin is a former four-star general and the Secretary of Defense. He loves to bash people like Mark Milley. Mark Milley dragged him on the floor when it came to talking about critical race theory being taught in the military, which I'm still not hearing about being taught in the military. But people like to bring this up as like, oh my God, critical race theory, not critical race theory. Yes, exactly. But the thing is he's saying we need to have an understanding of this because there's so many things that get taught in the military that some people don't have a problem with now, but for some reason they have a problem with critical race theory. I don't even know everything about it. But for what I've read about it, it's really not that big of a deal, honestly. But whatever. I'm just kind of like running off the mouth right now. But the fact that nobody's going after Matt Gaetz, except for like the Democratic side, but nobody on the Republican side is, really kind of goes to show that they don't really give a shit about what Hunter Biden did. If they did, they've got a real funny way of showing it if they're still willing to support people like Matt Gaetz. So the First Lady is in hot water too as well. This week, she was speaking at a conference of Unidos US, which is a Latino civil rights and advocacy group that used to be known as La Raza. That's right, the La Raza, the one that everybody on the conservative right and the militias and all the other guys were freaking out about because La Raza stands for the race. And they were freaking out, they were losing their minds because La Raza had endorsed then Senator Obama when he was running for office in 2008. So during this, First Lady Jill Biden was giving props to Raul Zaguirre, I believe I'm sorry, I probably should look this up. He's the president of Unidos US, who was also awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by Jill Biden. She said, and I quote, Raul helped build this organization with the understanding that the diversity of this community, as distinct as the bodegas of the Bronx, as beautiful as the blossoms of Miami, and as unique as the breakfast tacos here in San Antonio, is your strength, she said. Now, the conservative base lost their freaking minds. There were people on Facebook saying, oh my God, what a terrible thing for her to say. She should never have said that. She should come right out and this is why the entire Biden family is just corrupt. They say terrible things. Everybody's like losing their minds over this. Should she have said that? No. Should she found a better way to wear this? Absolutely. But the thing is, like, the conservatives do not have a leg to stand on in this regard, okay? Yes, was this in poor taste? Should she have said it? No. Should she outright apologize? Absolutely. From what I understand, she's somewhat apologized, but it's kind of like a low-tier apology. Apparently her publicist apologized, though. I mean, I didn't hear her actually come out and say, I never should have said these things. I owe you a very distinct apology. There's no excuse for it. You come out looking so much better if you just say, I never should have said the thing. I was wrong for me to say it. I'm not going to make excuses for it. Because if you just keep trying to make excuses, I just think you're just burying yourself into a deeper hole. It's that simple. But the thing is, the conservative base has zero ground to stand on here, okay? If you are a conservative and you are offended by the breakfast tacos comment, okay, I just want to ask you a question. How did you feel when Trump said Kung Flu and China virus when COVID struck? Because I remember the conservative base thought it was the funniest thing ever. They were, the Kung Flu, I love it. The China virus, yes, it is the absolute wit of this president. We love the idea of Kung Flu. I heard people say Kung Flu all the time. They were laughing about it. They were making an absolute riot about this. And now they're offended by breakfast tacos? I don't buy it. Oh, let's not forget about the time that Trump kept on calling Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas because of her Native American heritage. people always call Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas because Trump was doing it. But there was the MAGA birds were all doing it too. MAGA birds will always call Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas because their God Emperor Trump called her Pocahontas. He called her Pocahontas so many unbelievable times because he questioned her Native American heritage. As little as it might have been, but the fact of the matter is he was calling her Pocahontas. He was comparing immigrants coming into our country as rapists, drug dealers, and cartel members. But some I assume are good people, he would say. He called him, an American judge, a Mexican, even though he's from Indiana, and said he was being treated unfairly because he was a Mexican, because he wanted to build a wall on the southern border. That's what he wanted to do, and he felt like he was being improperly mistreated by this judge who happened to have Mexican heritage, but he called him a Mexican. Now, the conservative base was very hush-hush about this. They didn't say a damn thing about this. Why? It's because they're hypocrites. They don't really care about the comment. It's only about this is because it's Jill Biden. They have everything to say bad about Jill Biden. They're hypocrites. It's that simple. They don't give a shit about the word. They don't really care that they offended Mexicans. They don't care about offending Mexicans. Who am I kidding? Seriously, I'm sorry, but if you're offended by the breakfast tacos comment, but you didn't say anything about the Kung Flu, China virus, I'm sorry, you're a hypocrite. Again, she shouldn't have said it. It was the wrong thing to say. She should be outright saying, I shouldn't have said those comments. It's that simple. But I'm simply calling out the fact that people that are pretending to be offended are not really offended. They're just virtue signaling now. And even Fox News says, she did this deliberately, and now they're going to drive Latinos to the GOP. I don't see that happening anytime in the near future. Especially the way the GOP has treated some Hispanics in the past, okay? I mean, seriously. When Trump said, we've got rapists and drug dealers and cartel members coming in the country, that's what you hear people say. All the people that are coming into this country by port of entry or coming across the border, illegally as you might want to call it, people that are undocumented immigrants, they call them all cartel members, rapists, drug dealers. They call them all these things. It's because Trump says these things. I mean, don't take it from me. You could probably find all kinds of videos about this. You'll find this guy that when Trump was running for office, this dude was seriously muscled up and had tattoos all over the place. He says, build that tortilla, go back and make my tortilla, motherfucker, and build that wall for me. Trump, I love Trump. You could find him on YouTube anywhere. It's because of the rhetoric that was being spread around by this guy. He incited the masses that were already having a problem with immigrants coming into our country. So you're going to tell me that you're offended by what Dr. Jill Biden says? Oh, if you're consistent, fine. You're not going to hear a peep out of me. But if you're not consistent in this regard, I think you're just being a hypocrite. Sorry. Just calling it for what I see it. So the Uvalde school footage was just released this week. And I can honestly tell you folks, it was really hard to watch some of this footage. And I think the thing that really made it even harder to watch was the fact that there was actually in the footage itself, in the surveillance camera footage, at a corner of the screen, the editor wrote in, the sound of children screaming has been removed. Now, this is 70 minutes of footage from what I understand. 70 minutes of footage of children screaming, and this editor had to go and delete and remove the screaming. I can understand why. Because nobody wants to hear these children screaming. Nobody wants to hear them as their lives are being ended by this freaking monster that killed them. Nobody wants to hear this stuff. Why should we? Why should we listen to the sound of children screaming? It's already heartbreaking to know how many children died when they didn't need to. But it's heartbreaking to think about how much footage they had to remove of their screams. Part of me says they should probably release that footage because we all need this reminder. It needs to be etched in our brains forever. But honestly, I can understand why they need to remove it because these parents don't need to hear their children screaming. I wouldn't want that on them or anybody. I've heard the screams of people as they died. It's not pretty. I've seen children die in combat. It's not pretty. Well, not direct combat, but as a result of combat. I saw children die right in front of me at Al Yarmouk Hospital in Baghdad in 2003. It's not a pretty sight, people. I'm telling you. It was really hard for me as a 20-year-old soldier at the time. I can't imagine what it's like for the other children. Not that some people care. They're just going to use this to spread their agenda anyway. But the reason why I'm so upset about this is the fact that in this footage, you saw all the police officers that were there responding to this shooting. In the footage, they are seen running away from the gunshots, from the gunfire. Some of these cops are kitted out. Kitted out meaning that they are in full tactical gear with their weapons at the ready. They ran away from the shooter. Uvalde bragged that, especially the police department and their SWAT, bragged about the fact that 40% of the funding from the community went into the police department, that they were ready to respond at a moment's notice to a school shooter, and they failed. They failed miserably. Police officers were seen checking their phones. There was even a police officer who was looking at his phone. His screensaver, or like the home screen on his phone, was the Punisher logo. I mean, these guys were checking their phones and not doing a thing. How sad is that? I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me, people. And it's not that I'm against the cops. I'm pro-police when they do the right thing. But these cops failed these families and these children on every level. Now, it might be easy to say, well, you've never run into a situation like that. Well, I've run into a situation similar to that, where I didn't know if this person had a gun. These guys knew he had a gun. He was in a classroom and he was killing children, and they did nothing. For 70 minutes, this killer roamed that school for freely and killed all those children and those adults. It's a damn shame. I mean, we've kept on seeing footage of police officers that have no problem killing unarmed people, dislocating shoulders of people that are mentally handicapped or not, or that are like that have dementia, or for example, shooting a guy multiple times because he's in a wheelchair and he might have a knife. I mean, there are many cases where police have gone entirely too far. Daniel Shaver's a great example. Daniel Shaver was crawling on his hands and knees, begging for his life, saying that he was not a threat to anybody, and the cop still shot him. Because he says, I don't want you reaching. When he wasn't reaching for anything, his shirt had fallen back to his shoulders, and he went to go tuck it back, and the cop shot him with an AR-15. Killed him. Murdered him. But no charges were brought against him, which is a damn shame. But for some reason, police officers in fully kitted tactical gear with weapons can't take down one inexperienced 18-year-old kid with an AR-15. 2 AR-15s, as a matter of fact. What does that tell you, folks? Seriously. Honestly, every cop in Uvalde needs to find another job. They should never be allowed to work as police officers ever again. They have lost the rapport and the respect of the people of that town. They need to go out and hire brand new police officers, because they've pretty much damaged the rapport, especially the cops that worked on the scene. This is the problem that we're running into, though. And it's when you lose the rapport and the respect of communities, when you're supposed to be the police to enforce the law, it's gone. It takes forever to get that rapport back. I know, I'm speaking from experience. When people make false, empty promises to a community and you don't follow through, you lose rapport. And the fact that these police officers did nothing for that length amount of time until a Border Patrol agent killed the shooter with the shotgun, what message does that send? And it's completely heartbreaking to think that so many children died when so many children did not mean to. Once again, shame on those police for doing absolutely nothing for that length amount of time. So, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was sexually harassed outside of the Capitol steps by a conservative comedian by the name of Alex Stein. Now, I've seen Alex Stein on Fox News with Tucker Carlson, big surprise, and he's also been on the Hippy Dippy Round Table with Dylan Burns. This guy is something else, I tell you that much. He is completely out of control. So this guy waited outside the steps, and when he saw AOC, this is what he said. Hear it from his words.
AOC, my favorite big booty Latina. I love you, AOC. You're my favorite. She wants to kill babies, but she's still beautiful. You look very beautiful in that dress. You look very sexy. Look at that booty on AOC. That's my favorite big booty Latina.
I want to do a little selfie.
I love it. My favorite AOC. Nice to meet you, AOC. Look how sexy she looks in that dress. Woo, I love it, AOC. Hot, hot, hot like a tamale.
Now, some people say, oh, well, that's not that big of a deal. He's just being funny. It's just, okay, well, first things first, okay? We have to understand something, okay? Some people say things that are ridiculous for clout. I'm more than likely am a firm believer he was just clout chasing. He was doing it for fame, popularity, and for attention. Well, he got the attention, all right? Because now it's set off a complete Twitter, Facebook, media firestorm, essentially. People are losing their minds, and they have every right to, because we just once again saw an elected official who was sexually harassed by some scumbag saying that she's got a big booty and she looks really beautiful in that dress and things like that, you know. Now, I want everybody to understand something. Some people say stupid things, and I'm not saying it's okay. Some people say really horrendously bad things. Women get catcalled all the time. I'm not saying it's right. I'm simply saying it happens all of the time. But the thing is, though, is that AOC then said that first she wanted to deck the guy, but then she said, I need votes more than I need charges. That's why she threw up the deuces and said, hey, here for the selfie. And people kind of took it the ways like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. Well, honestly, you could tell when she went live from her phone that she was bothered by this, because she was basically treated like a sex object, essentially, okay? Now, is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez attractive? Of course. She's a beautiful young woman. She's also very intelligent. Some people don't think she's that intelligent. Some people think she's stupid. Well, you know, honestly, she's, you know, magna cum laude from Boston University. I'd say she's got some smarts to her. She didn't get there by accident. Yeah, she might have been a bartender, but you know what? We all talk about how much we like people that can be like us. I'd say she fits that to the letter. Now, do I agree with everything she says? Of course not, no. But the thing is, though, regardless of all of our personal feelings about AOC, she did not deserve that. The guy only did that for clout because he wanted to be funny. And guess what? People think he's hilarious. I, for one, don't think he's funny. I do have a sense of humor. I got a very dark sense of humor. There's a time and a place to say jokes and things like that. But what he did right there was not funny, as a matter of fact. Now, I was listening. My wife and I were listening to Hunter Avalon, okay? Hunter Avalon was asking anybody, I dare anybody to come on my platform to tell me and try to justify this. One guy named Red Pill Gaming came on and was trying to justify it, saying, oh, it's not that big of a deal. She's just taking it. She really didn't think it was that big of a problem. And Hunter basically told him how much of a moron this guy was. Now, I want everybody to understand something, okay? Imagine if it wasn't AOC. Imagine if it was your wife, your girlfriend. What if it was your mother? What if it was your sister? What if it was like your 15-year-old niece or your 15-year-old daughter that was being sexually harassed by some people? How would you feel then? Oh, those guys are just kidding around. I'm not worried about it too much. I'm pretty sure a lot of people, like at least 99% of guys, would be saying, okay, fuck that. I'm going to beat this guy's ass. That's a very appropriate reaction, honestly, because nobody wants our significant others to be catcalled or harassed like that. I would lose my shit if anybody catcalled my wife like that. I would lose my fucking mind, because honestly, that's a very normal thing. Now, I'm pretty sure my wife wouldn't want me to go to jail for these things, but the thing is, though, she also doesn't want to have to worry about being catcalled. She does not want to be catcalled by some random stranger, okay? This is, and you know, people say, oh, I'm just virtue signaling right now. No, it takes a long time for people to come to the realization that just because you think it might be a good idea does not necessarily mean it is a good idea. Just because in the back of your mind is like, oh yeah, I'm going to catgirl that girl because she's a hot piece of ass, you know. If you do that and you find out that she's married and her husband clocks you, are you really going to be mad at him for doing that? I mean, you have to remember, actions do have consequences, though. Because I want everybody to remember something, okay? At the end of the day, AOC is still a person. She might be one, but she is still a human being. She doesn't deserve to get that kind of treatment. And you can have your opinions about her points of view. You can say she's dumb as a box of hammers. You could say that her positions are terrible. You could say how she lied about where she was on January 6th, which I don't think is that important, really. Because the fact of the matter is, these people said they were going to find her and do terrible things to her. I mean, you have to look at this from a much more broad perspective, okay? Just because you might think it's a good idea doesn't mean it is a good idea. Your actions actually do have consequences, and people will remember you for this. Now, I don't know if Alex Stein is going to, think about this later on down the line, like, you know what? I never should have said that. That was a terrible thing for me to say. I have no idea if he's going to be that way, because honestly, I wouldn't trust this guy to say this shit, okay? Because I think he's too much of a scumbag and a coward to actually come out and say he was wrong about this, okay? I do, however, think that some people realize how wrong they were with some of the things that they've done in their past. And I think some people just don't really take that into account, honestly. Some people might think, oh, I was young, it's not that big of a deal. Well, people might remember that. You might have catcalled a woman 20 years ago, and then you may not remember her, but she might remember you. She might remember the impact that you had on her. She might remember like how you are one of hundreds of men that have catcalled her, and each time it made her feel like less of a person, like a piece of meat, essentially. Now, there's nothing wrong with saying a woman looks beautiful, you look quite nice today, and some women might take it wrongly and might take it like, yeah, kind of a little creepy, but you know what? That's their interpretation, okay? Even if you're trying to be respectful. But what this guy was doing was deliberate. He was doing it for shock factor. He was doing it for shock value. Some people say, oh, well, we're just living in a sensitive society. People are just freaking out too much. She just needs to grow thicker skin. You need to think about it from a much more broad perspective. Now, the thing that I would love to know is, like, I would love to know what if a person, like another man, came up to Alex Stein and started hitting on him the way he was hitting on AOC? How would he take it? Especially if he caught him off guard. Would he be like, oh, yeah, this guy's just kidding? What if it was the real deal? Because situations like this happen all the time. They're called prison, where fresh meat will come into the prison, and next thing you know, they're getting catcalled. Happens all the time. I'm pretty sure those guys don't feel the exact same way that AOC felt that day. They were looked at as a piece of meat, honestly. And that's one thing that people need to take into consideration. If you have a problem with, AOC being upset about this, then what does that say about you, honestly? Again, you could be critical of her points of view. That's fine. You can be critical of like how she is as a congresswoman. That's fine. That is entirely your right as an American. But what happened on that day, what Alex Stein did, was unacceptable. Simple as that. Again, you can call this a virtue signal, but I'm just calling it for what it is. I don't condone it when it happens to anybody. We ought to know better than this. We need to be better about this in our society. But consider the fact that what we're seeing right now, it goes to show that we still have a long way to go in our society. And it's a damn shame, honestly. So, an update on the 10-year-old rape victim. She still has not been identified, and I hope she does not get identified because her life is pretty much screwed up enough as is right now because of a man that raped her. A 27-year-old man by the name of Gerson Fuentes. He was arrested, and he confessed to the crime. Multiple occasions, that is. Now, the reason why I'm bringing up this story is because when the story first got reported, it made headlines all across the country. President Biden talked about it, and obviously the people on the conservative right thought it was bullshit. Jim Jordan, of all people, said, another lie. Is anyone surprised? He tweeted it. But now that tweet's no longer there. Especially after they found out that this actually did happen, and the guy that did it has been arrested. But it's no surprise. I mean, it's not the first time Jim Jordan's looked the other way while a rape has occurred, called people liars in that regard. Just think about Ohio State. Look it up. You'll find it. But he's not the only person, though. Ohio Attorney General David Yost said that he hadn't heard a whisper from law enforcement in Ohio about any reports or arrests made in connection with such a case. Well, guess what? Now they have him. They have the rapist that committed this rape to this young 10-year-old girl. That's ruined her life forever. But things get worse. It gets much, much worse. Fox News and Fox Channels doxed the doctor who performed the abortion, the procedure to take care of this 10-year-old child. instead of having her be condemned to motherhood at the age of 10. She was 6 weeks and 3 days pregnant. That's why she went to Indiana, though, to get help. Urgent help. And what does Fox News do? They dox the name of the doctor. And what else do they do? Now they're trying to find out if Gerson Fuentes is an illegal immigrant. I mean, you can't make this shit up, people. These guys, these people are mentally deranged, honestly. They don't give a damn about this 10-year-old girl who was raped. They tried to call her a liar. They tried to say the story was false. They said there was no case of this happening, okay? You need to understand something, okay? It's hard enough for some rape victims to come forward because they're afraid of being called a liar. Because of people like y'all. Now, if there's a case where a woman is a liar, then you have a case. But each situation needs to be taken seriously from the get-go. Because the more that you condemn people, the less likely rape victims are going to come forward. The more you downplay and say, well, she's obviously doing this for attention. Why is she coming forward with this now? It's only going to drive women further away from reporting. Or even men. Because men are victims of sexual assault too. But the more you try to say, oh, this is obviously fake. I haven't heard anything about this. Until you know for sure, maybe you should keep your damn mouth shut. How about that? Because a 10-year-old girl's life is ruined. Yeah, she might have the rest of her life, but she's going to have this trauma. And the fact that people are saying, the man had intercourse. No. I'm sorry. Not intercourse. The man fucking raped her. It's that simple. He committed rape. Rape is the word. Not intercourse. Rape. Get it through your freaking heads. And I mean, if you want to be politically correct, that is entirely up to you, but I'm just calling it for what it is. This monster raped this girl. Her life is pretty much forever changed now. And thank goodness she was able to get it taken care of. Because there is just no reason why a 10-year-old girl should be forced into motherhood. I mean, it's bad enough that, the hypothetical has been posed that, well, the child should not pay for the sins of the father. Are you trying to tell me that a rapist has more rights to commit a rape than a mother has the right to terminate a pregnancy? I'll put it to you like this. If you're saying, oh, well, she could just put the baby up for adoption. Okay, let me ask you this. Are you simply trying to tell me that the rapist still has more rights than the mother, than the 10-year-old girl? Should a 10-year-old girl be forced to take care of a newborn infant? Then why are you forcing her to carry a baby to term? How about a 12-year-old child? How about a 15-year-old child? How about a 16-year-old child? How about a 20-year-old woman that's been raped? Should she be forced to take care of that baby? Of course not. That's why this whole notion is completely absurd, and people have got to wake up and stop making excuses for rapists and stop saying that, oh, well, she shouldn't terminate the pregnancy. Yes, the hell she should. She has every right to. It's bad enough of the trauma she's going to have to endure, and the fact that so many people out there are just, now they're more concerned about the doctor that performed the abortion and more concerned about the fact that she was able to get the abortion than the fact that she was raped. You idiots. You morons. Shame on you. Shame on you for saying these things. Shame on you for trying to condemn this child to motherhood. Shame on you for saying that she should not have this abortion. And shame on you for those that said she was a liar. Shame on those that continue to lie about that this never took place. And the fact that Jim Jordan didn't even have the balls to come out and say, I was wrong, I never should have said this. He doesn't give a shit. He doesn't care about her. He doesn't care about this child. He doesn't care about these rape victims. I might sound a little mad about this, but damn it, I am. This is the reason why the right to an abortion, this is why I'm pro-choice. This is why the choice is so important. It's not because women are just going to go out and have abortions willy-nilly. That's completely absurd. It's a ridiculous thing for you to focus your attention on because it has nothing to do with you. It's about cases like this, where a child who has been raped by a man has the right to get an abortion. Her innocence was taken from her. But yet you're more concerned about the rapist's ability to conceive a child. That's what it is. You can hate the fact that I feel that way, but damn it, that's exactly the way things are. So the final story tonight. Now, there's still some reports coming out about this, but when I first heard about this, I was like, you've got to be freaking kidding me. So, apparently, there are still so many people out there that believe that the election was stolen. They don't believe that this many people voted for Joe Biden. So, apparently, there was a campaign of people canvassing across neighborhoods across the country, knocking on people's doors, asking them, who did you vote for in the last election? To me, that is frightening. It made out, some people think, oh, that's not that big of a deal because I can just tell them to get the hell off my property. Well, it's the fact that people like this are doing this to begin with, and that people are actually condoning this action. First things first, if anybody ever came and knocked on my door and asked me who the hell I voted for, I'd tell them, kiss my ass, get the hell off my property. And if they kept on coming back, well, then let's just say that, I've got ways of having them removed from my property, okay? But it's absolutely absurd that there are people going around the country, there were going around the country, I don't know if this is still continuing, that were knocking on people's doors and asking them, excuse me, who did you vote for in the last election? That's none of your damn business, whether you voted Republican, Democrat, or didn't vote. That is entirely your right. Nobody else has a right to know who you voted for. When you go to the ballot box, when you go to the polls, or you submit by mail or absentee ballot, that vote is your vote. And honestly, if you don't feel like sharing it with anybody, you shouldn't have to. You shouldn't be forced to. You shouldn't be compelled to share that with any freaking buddy. Nobody should be knocking door to door asking who you voted for. If a Democrat did it, I would tell them, get the hell off my property. If a Republican did it, I said, get the hell off my property. If an independent, a communist, or a socialist said, who'd you vote for? I'm telling them, get the hell off of my property. Nobody should be bothering anybody to ask who you voted for in the last election. Never, ever. It's ridiculous. But the thing is there are people out there that are desperate to prove that the election was stolen when it was not stolen. My God, people, how many times do I have to say it? How many times do people need to be told? They've had experts, they've had witnesses, they've had stories that have been debunked. My God, the election was not stolen. It's time for you people to stop with this nonsense. Get over it, for Christ's sake. It's boring, it's old, it's just... It did not happen. Stop listening to the lies by the MAGA birds. The MAGA birds are lying to you. The election was not stolen. Dinesh D'Souza made a fraudumentary, for crying out loud. God, I don't even know what more I can say about this. People just need to get a grip on reality and stop with this nonsense. If you want to canvass, say, here's what we're doing with the next election, great, do it. More people need to canvass to get the information out there on who people should vote for. And people have every right to kick you off their property if they want you to not come to their property. Especially if it's like a Republican that comes to my house, says, hey, we want you to come down to our election. I'm going to say, please leave. Don't, just leave me alone. If I want to partake in something, I will let you guys know. It's that simple. So before I wrap up tonight's episode, I just want to take the time to thank everybody for tuning in today, and for those that are listening on the replay. So, what could we take away from this week? It's going to be a lot of doom and gloom for the next upcoming weeks. I can definitely say that for certain. The reason why I say there's a lot of doom and gloom is because Ukraine is still at war against Russia. Gas prices are still fairly high, even though gas prices are dropping. There's still more coming for the January 6th committee. Steve Bannon apparently is supposed to testify, but we don't know if he's actually going to do so. Pat Cipollone is more than likely going to testify on everything that took place. Apparently, he's already verified what Cassidy Hutchinson said when I covered in my last episode. But there's a lot of things that's coming down the pipe, I feel. There's a lot of crazy things that are happening in this country right now. There are people that I talk to on Discord all the time that are afraid that in the next 10 years, our country is going to fall apart and fracture. Now, I hope they're wrong, and I hope that does not take place. But the fact that there is so much division in our country, I can definitely see that happening. But I don't want it to happen. My wife and I talk all the time. We worry about the future of this country because of the amount of division there is in this country. Now, I'm a firm believer that we could all have a difference of opinion and still get along. We do it all the time. We do it every single day. When I'm driving down the road and I see people cut me off in traffic, that could have been a Democrat that cut me off, an independent, a communist, a socialist, a Republican. I don't care. I'm just more mad at the fact that this person cut me off in traffic. But there are times like Jon Stewart said, people that drive into the tunnel is like, well, I go, you go, I go, you go, I go, you go. And sometimes the end of the light at the end of the tunnel is not the promised land. Sometimes it's just New Jersey. Not a hit on the people from New Jersey. But the thing is, though, is that in this country, nobody knows who voted for who in the last election. We need to stop identifying people based upon who they voted for. And yes, I know I'm guilty for calling people MAGA birds and calling them Trump loyalists, but that's just because when I see them, that's the only name I have for them. Because I just think some of their reasoning is just completely batshit crazy. But the thing is, though, if I walk up to a random person, unless it's stamped on their forehead or they're wearing the attire, I don't know who they voted for, but honestly, it shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter who you voted for in the next election. We should all be able to treat each other with dignity and respect. Even if you did vote for Trump, I should not be treating you like a bad person. And if you find out I voted for Biden, you should not be treating me like I hate my country. But I don't know if we're ever going to get to that point again. I would really love for our country to get back to that point, but it's going to take a long time. And I really hope that this prediction that our country is going to fall apart in the next 10 years is not true. I hope eventually that our country finds some way to get its act together and continue to treat people the way we all should be treated and not treat people, in such disarray or just treat people poorly just because they might have voted against us. At the end of the day, though, we're still all Americans at the end of the day. And I want everybody to remember this. Thank you, everybody, for tonight, and I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Don't forget to hit like and share. Do not forget to subscribe. Do not forget to share this out to all your friends, whether you like me or hate me. Get this information out there and get this podcast out there to as many people as possible. Thank you so very much, and I want you all to have a great evening and have a great weekend.